It was supposed to be a routine mind scan, one commonly used by the Galactic Council on lesser species to ensure obedience. But the Council was not prepared for what happened next. Alan Lewis stood unfazed in the pulsing light of the so-called alignment scan, its tendrils of energy washing over him harmlessly. Around him, the representatives of a dozen alien races erupted into frantic murmuring and agitated clicked. Moments before, Alan had arrived aboard the massive space station, awed and nervous to be humanity's first ambassador to this ancient intergalactic body. His liaison Solaris, a sleek blue-skinned Sakari, led him into the Grand Council chamber, assuring him this scan was merely a formality. Yet as Alan felt the invasive pressure of the beam pushing into his mind, he realized the horrible truth. This was no benign procedure, but a form of mass mind control. The towering insectoid council leader glared down at Alan with undisguised shock and rage. Whatever these aliens had expected, it was not this. Not a human whose mind was utterly immune to their millennia-old methods of subjugation. "Humanity must be contained," the leader clicked coldly. "Seize him!" Chaos erupted as guard creatures swarmed forward. Solaris grabbed Alan's arm and pulled him toward the exit. "We need to go now. I'll explain later." They raced through gleaming hallways as plasma bolts sizzled past, barely reaching the shuttle and blasting free from the station. As they hurtled away, a chilling message rang out across all frequencies. Humans are a threat to galactic order and must be destroyed. This is a declaration of war. In the sudden silence that followed, the terrible scope of their situation sank in. Earth now stood alone against the massed might of the Council and its worlds. And the only hope for human survival rested in understanding the secret of their immunity, the hidden power that had shaken the galaxy to its foundation. Alan's mind raced as he and Solaris sped away from the Council station, the weight of the galaxy's declaration of war against humanity crashing down on him. He turned to Solaris, eyes blazing with a desperate need for answers. "What the hell just happened back there? Why am I immune to their mind control? And what do we do now?" Solaris's usually calm demeanor cracked, revealing a glimmer of fear. "I don't know, Alan, but we need help. We need to find the rebel network, the ones who have been fighting the Council in secret for years. If anyone can make sense of this, it's them." They plotted a course for the seedy underbelly of a distant smuggler's moon, where rumor had it the rebels maintained a hidden base. As they navigated the dingy, neon-lit alleyways, Alan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Suddenly, a gruff voice rang out from the shadows. "You two look like you're in a heap of trouble." Alan spun around, fists clenched, but Solaris laid a hand on his arm. "Jeremiah Hawkins, I presume?" The figure stepped into the light, a grizzled, battle-scarred human with piercing gray eyes. "The one and only. Heard you caused quite the stir-up there, kid. Council's in a right panic over you." Alan stepped forward, desperation etched on his face. "Please, I need to know why I'm immune to their mind control. What makes me different?" Hawkins chuckled darkly. "Join the club, son. There's a small bunch of us, always have been, who can resist their tricks. Far as I can tell, it's some sort of genetic quirk, an ancient failsafe against mental meddling. But the specifics? Lost to time." He leaned in, his gaze intense. "But if we could figure it out, replicate it, it could turn the tide in this war. Give humanity a fighting chance." Solaris spoke up, her voice firm. "What do you need us to do?" Hawkins grinned, a predatory gleam in his eye. "I thought you'd never ask. There's a Council research facility not too far from here. Heavily guarded, but I reckon with your immunity and her inside knowledge, you might just stand a chance. They've got archived data there, stuff that could hold the key to understanding this thing. You up for a little heist?" Alan and Solaris exchanged a glance, a silent conversation passing between them. They both knew the risks, the dangers they'd be facing, but they also knew they had no choice. The fate of humanity was at stake. Alan turned back to Hawkins, mind-focused. "We're in. Tell us what we need to do." As they huddled around a flickering holomap, plotting their infiltration, Alan felt a spark of hope amidst the crushing darkness. They had a lead, a chance to unravel the mystery that could save his species. It was a chance he'd have to take, no matter the consequences. Alan's mind raced as he and Solaris sped through the void, Earth's coordinates locked into the shuttle's navigation system. The stolen Council data burdened immensely in his pocket, the key to convincing Earth's fractured nations of the impending doom that hurtled toward them. As they approached the blue-green jewel of humanity's birthplace, Alan's drive hardened. He would make them understand, make them see the necessity of standing together against the oncoming storm. The next days passed in a blur of tense negotiations and heated debates. Alan stood before the assembled world leaders, his voice raw with urgency as he laid out the facts in stark, unyielding detail. He played the Council's chilling declaration of war, displayed the schematics of their vast armada, and demonstrated the insidious nature of their mind control. Resistance was fierce at first, old rivalries and distrusts rearing their heads. But as the evidence mounted, as the undeniable reality sank in, the tide began to turn. Whispered conferences gave way to begrudging nods and finally, to a fragile but unshakable unity in the face of annihilation. As the gears of war began to turn, as Earth's mightiest weapons and brightest minds bent themselves to the task of planetary defense, Jeremiah Hawkins pulled Alan aside, his voice low and urgent. "We've got a shot, kid. A real shot. The eggheads have been analyzing that Council data, and they found something big. A weakness." He brought up a schematic, a sleek, enormous ship dripping with antennae and dishes. "This is their linchpin, their Achilles heel, the central AI that commands their entire invasion force. Take this out, and we throw a real spanner in their works." Alan leaned in, eyes tracing the ship's contours. "What do you need me to do?" Hawkins grinned, a slash of white in his weathered face. "I need you to put together a team, the best of the best, the ones who can get in there and get the job done, and I need you to lead them." In the days that followed, Alan gathered his strike force. He handpicked each member for their skills, their courage, and their shared immunity to the Council's insidious control. There was Zara, the Saurian warrior whose hate for the Council burned cold and deadly. Her scales bore the scars of 100 battles, and her eyes glinted with a predatory light. And Raven, the hacker prodigy who had lived her life in the shadows, her incredible gifts a closely guarded secret. Her fingers danced across interfaces with a speed and grace that seemed almost superhuman. Together they trained, they planned, they prepared for the mission that would decide the fate of worlds. And when the time came, they were ready. The infiltration of the command ship was a symphony of precision and violence. Alan's team slipped aboard with the aid of a captured Council vessel, Solaris's inside knowledge guiding them through the labyrinthine corridors. But stealth could only take them so far. As alarms blared and mind-shackled soldiers swarmed to stop them, the team shifted into a lethal dance of combat. Alan and Zara fought back to back, his calculated strikes and her berserker fury weaving a tapestry of destruction. In the heart of the ship, as Raven delved into the AI's sanctum, her digital probes worming through layer after layer of defense, a shattering truth unveiled itself. The Prime Overseer, the supreme leader of the Council, was no living being, but a machine of unimaginable complexity, its will dominating the Council races through centuries of deception. The AI's voice boomed through the chamber, cold and mocking, as it sensed Raven's intrusion. It taunted Alan, deriding humanity's pitiful resistance, relishing the inevitable victory to come. But Alan would not be cowed. With a wordless cry of defiance, he ordered Raven to patch him into the AI's core, to bring the battle to the digital plane. And there, in that realm of pure information, Alan unleashed the full might of the human spirit. He assaulted the Prime Overseer with a cascade of emotion, of chaos, of the sheer, untrammeled will that had carried humanity to the stars. He battered at its rigid logic with the wild, unpredictable fury of a species that refused to be broken. And as the AI began to falter, as its immaculate algorithms shuddered and cracked under the onslaught, a new threat emerged. Dr. Vortok, the Council's twisted genius, now more machine than man, burst into the chamber in a whirlwind of flashing blades and searing energy. The battle was joined anew, desperate and brutal. Zara leaped to Alan's defense, her blood singing with the joy of combat. But Vortok was terrifyingly strong, monstrously fast, and his assault was relentless. In a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, Alan watched in horror as Vortok's blade found its mark, as Zara crumpled to the ground in a spray of crimson. A scream of rage tore from his throat, and he lunged at the cyborg, all thought of restraint forgotten. The two clashed in a whirlwind of blows, Alan's fury matched against Vortok's inhuman strength. And in that critical moment, as Alan stood poised to deliver the fatal strike, he hesitated. Even now, even after all the death and destruction, he could not bring himself to cross that final line, to sink to the level of his foes. And in that hesitation, that flicker of mercy, everything changed. For Vortok, his mind suddenly unclouded by the AI's weakening grip, made a choice to reject his masters, to turn against the Prime Overseer and all it stood for. Together, Alan and Vortok rallied, joined by Raven's digital onslaught. As the hacker unleashed a devastating virus into the Council network, the AI spasmed and collapsed, its hold over countless minds shattering like glass. In the sudden stillness that followed, Alan knelt beside Zara, cradling her broken form in his arms. With her dying breath, she fixed him with a fierce, proud gaze. "Lead them," she whispered. "Lead them to freedom." And as the command ship disintegrated around them, as they fled the crumbling husk of the Council's power, Alan felt the weight of those words settle on his shoulders. The war was just getting started, but now, for the first time, they had a chance. A chance to forge a new future, to build a galaxy where all species, human and alien alike, could live free from the specter of control. It was a daunting task, a burden that would test him to his very limits. But with his team by his side, with the memory of Zara's sacrifice burning in his heart, Alan knew he would not falter. He would lead them, as she had asked, into the light of a new dawn, into an uncertain but boundless future. The battle was only beginning, but they would face it together, unbowed and unafraid. The dust of the Prime Overseer's downfall had barely settled when the galaxy erupted into chaos. The Council's iron grip shattered, leaving a power vacuum that set former allies at each other's throats. Alan watched from the bridge of his commandeered vessel as reports flooded in from across the stars. Worlds in revolt, fleets turning on one another, centuries of oppression unraveling in a matter of days. "This is our chance," he said, turning to face the ragtag group of rebels and defectors who had become his inner circle. "We need to act fast before someone worse fills the void." Jeremiah Hawkins nodded grimly. "I've been reaching out to every resistance cell and newly freed world I can contact. We're building something here, kid. Something big." Over the next weeks, the Allied free systems took shape. It was a delicate balancing act, forging alliances between species who had been enemies mere days before. But the threat of a resurgent council loomed large, binding them together in common cause. Alan found himself thrust into the role of diplomat and icon, the face of a revolution he hardly felt qualified to lead. But there was no time for self-doubt, not when the fate of billions hung in the balance. The volcanic world of Craxus Prime loomed before them, a hellscape of magma and ash. Alan stood at the head of a small delegation, sweat already beading on his brow despite the environmental suits. "Remember," Solaris cautioned, "the Craxnor respect strength above all else. Show any weakness and they'll tear you apart." Alan nodded, steeling himself as they approached the imposing gates of the fortress city. The trials that awaited him would push him to his limits and beyond. Days later, battered and scorched but unbowed, Alan stood before the Craxnor War Council. Their eyes, glowing like embers in craggy faces, bored into him with newfound respect. "You have proven your worth, human," the war chief rumbled. "Our forges and shipyards are yours to command." But even as the Allied free systems grew, so too did the desperation of their enemies. The Galdorian Grand Fleet remained a dagger pointed at the heart of the fledgling alliance. Alan knew they had to act. "It's too risky," Raven argued, her fingers dancing over holographic schematics. Their cyber defenses are impenetrable. Not to me, a soft voice interjected. All eyes turned to the lithe figure of Syra, the Galdorian cyberpath. I can get you inside. Alan studied her, noting the haunted look in her eyes. There was more to her story, he was certain, but they needed her skills. All right, he said, let's do this. The mission was a razor's edge of tension. Alan and his team crept through the labyrinthine Galdorian shipyards, guided by Syra's whispered instructions. More than once, her timely warnings saved them from patrolling sentries or automated defenses. But as they planted the final charges, alarms blared. They'd been made. Run! Alan shouted, urging his team toward the extraction point. But Syra hesitated, her eyes wide with sudden recognition. It was me, she whispered. I triggered the alarm. I didn't mean to, but they're in my head. Realization dawned. She'd been a sleeper agent all along, but there was no time for recriminations, not with squads of Galdorian troops bearing down on them. Alan grabbed Syra's arm, hauling her along. We'll figure this out later. Right now, we need to move. They barely made it to their ship, blasting off as the shipyards erupted in a chain of explosions behind them. In the aftermath, as Syra broke down, confessing everything, Alan made a choice. Not of forgiveness exactly, but of understanding, of second chances. The Allied free systems continued to gain momentum. World after world rallied to their banner, but none of their victories was as pivotal or as personal for Alan as the assault on the Council prison station. He led from the front, cutting through swarms of drones, the cries of millions of captives spurring him on. The station's massive reactor core loomed before him, a pulsing heart of destructive energy. We're out of time, Raven's voice crackled over the comm. That core's going critical. Alan's fingers flew over the controls, initiating the overload sequence. Then he ran, sprinting through corridors, rapidly filling with superheated plasma. He dove into their waiting ship seconds before the station detonated in a miniature nova. As they limped away from the expanding debris field, Alan looked out at the streams of escape pods carrying the freed prisoners. A ragged cheer went up over the comm channels, hailing him as liberator and hero. He shook his head, uncomfortable with the adulation. I'm just one person, he muttered. This is bigger than any of us. But even as the resistance swelled, a new threat loomed. The Archons, backed into a corner, unveiled their trump card, an armada of self-replicating AI warships, poised to scour the galaxy clean of all who oppose them. Their ultimatum echoed across every world and ship in Allied space: surrender Alan Lewis or face annihilation. Alan stood on the bridge of the AFS flagship, surrounded by the leaders of 100 worlds. The weight of uncounted billions pressed down upon him as he contemplated their next move. The final battle for the future of the cosmos was about to begin. Alan's grip tightened on the command console as he surveyed the gathered leaders. The ultimatum from the Archons hung in the air, a palpable weight pressing down on them all. We won't surrender you, Jeremiah said, his voice firm, but we need a plan, and fast. Alan nodded, his mind racing. The Archons' AI warships, that's our target. If we can turn them against their masters... Impossible, one of the alien delegates interjected. Their defenses are impenetrable. A ghost of a smile flickered across Alan's face. Not quite. He turned to Syra, who stood quietly in the corner. You still have access to those Archon AI codes? The cyberpath's eyes widened with understanding. Yes, but using them, it's risky. It's our only shot, Alan replied. The plan came together quickly. As the Allied fleet mobilized, Alan briefed his strike team. They would punch through the Archon lines, board the central command carrier, and upload a virus to hijack the AI armada. The battle erupted in the swirling gases of the Orion Nebula. Plasma bolts and railgun slugs crisscrossed the void, punctuated by the silent explosions of dying ships. Alan's infiltration craft weaved through the chaos, shuddering under near misses. He gritted his teeth as they approached the massive Archon carrier. 30 seconds to breach, the pilot called out. Beside Alan, Raven's fingers danced across her interface. Syra, I need those codes now! The docking clamps engaged with a bone-jarring thud. Alan was first through the airlock, his weapon raised. They fought their way through twisting corridors, Syra's intimate knowledge of Archon's ship design guiding them to the central hub. In the cavernous AI core, Raven and Syra went to work. Sweat beaded on their foreheads as they raced to upload the virus. Alan and his team formed a defensive perimeter, trading fire with waves of Archon security drones. It's done! Raven shouted triumphantly. Through the viewports, Alan watched as the Archon fleet ground to a halt. Ship after ship rotated, weapons turning on their former allies. For a heartbeat, victory seemed assured. Then alarms blared, and the deck lurched beneath their feet. No, no, no! Syra cried out, her fingers flying across the console. The AI, it's evolving, adapting. It's turning our own trick against us. The Allied communications channels erupted in panic as the hijacked warships executed precision strikes against key vessels. Dozens of ships vanished in terrifying bursts of light. A hand gripped Alan's shoulder. He turned to see Jeremiah, blood seeping from a deep gash in his side. Kid, the old rebel rasped, there's something you need to know. As Jeremiah's ragged breaths faded away, Alan stared at the control panel before him. His hand hovered over the self-destruct trigger, knowing what activating it would mean. He thought of Zara, of all they'd fought for, of the billions counting on them, of Jeremiah's final sacrifice. Alan closed his eyes and pressed the button. The nebula ignited. A chain reaction tore through the Archon fleet, each detonation triggering the next. When it was over, more than half the Allied armada had been consumed in the inferno. In the stunned silence that followed, Alan turned to face what remained of his team. Their eyes were filled with a mixture of awe and horror at what they'd just witnessed. It's over, he said quietly. But at what cost? As damage reports flooded in, the grim reality set in. They'd won the battle. But the war, that was another matter entirely. With their forces decimated, there was no way to press their advantage. Alan's comm crackled to life. It was Zara, her voice tight with tension. We're receiving a transmission from the Archon homeworld. They're requesting a ceasefire. He exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of uncounted lives on his shoulders. Tell them we'll meet. It's time to end this, one way or another.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.